There are some things that a human just does better than a computer, but there are a lot of things, rote data entry, for example, that a computer will do better and faster than a human. And I love the idea of freeing up time for folks to focus on that human interaction, that value add that they bring to clients versus just the boring everyday stuff that they have to do but don't really love.
Welcome, Model FAs. David DeSell here, CEO of Model FA and your host of the Model FA podcast. And I'm really excited for our guest today, Arielle Minicozzi. I was actually introduced to Arielle from a client, Amir Noor. And Amir Noor and I have worked together for last few years. So Amir, if you're listening to this episode, thank you very much. And Arielle works and runs a company called Sphynx Automation. So for those of you who are listening that wish you could leverage your time a little bit more, make your business less clunky and more streamlined, you're definitely going to want to tune in. But with that said, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, David. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. And you're in my neck of the woods in Florida, right?
I am. I'm in Naples, Florida, nice and warm and sunny. Before we jumped on, we were chatting about snow and how a few people have had closures of school. We don't have to worry about that here.
No, we do not. But growing up in Massachusetts, I did, but it's been nice to remain in shorts and a tee most of the year.
Agreed. Yes, I'm a New Jersey girl myself, so I can
Oh, there you
totally
go.
relate to getting away from that cold weather.
Very nice. Well, um, I feel like I see more and more of this where folks who are running companies that are supportive of financial advisors, including myself, were actually advisors. So walk us through a little bit about your background. You were an advisor for a bit. Was that, fresh out of school, or kind of walk us through your journey?
Yeah, it's kind of a winding journey. I'll give you the spark notes because to go into the whole details would probably take the entirety of this episode. But long story short, I was an art major in college, nothing at all to do with finance or tech. So you can see that it's really been a winding journey. I graduated and I got an internship at a mortgage company, and I was waiting for my opportunity to open up in the art world. Well, my 6-month internship turned into a 6-year tenure as a mortgage loan officer. And during that time, a lot of my clients would ask me questions about personal finance, what they should be doing as far as budgeting and insurance coverage, and how to better save to buy a house. And that line of questioning encouraged me to pursue the CFP education. I was thinking, okay, I'm not going to transition careers. I'll just get the knowledge because it would be really helpful to know. But if going from art school to loan officer should tell you anything about my personality, I really love to learn more and try new and different things. So I transitioned from mortgages to financial planning. I started my RIA in 2017. I ended up about a year in merging my solo with another solo. We had a joint practice for a couple of years. And then on the side, I was doing consulting for other advisors because as I had started my RIA and coming from a very corporate background, I felt like there was a lot of efficiency to be had through technology and setting up really dynamic processes for my business. And luckily for me, other advisors saw the work that I was doing. They wanted to participate in some of those innovations that we were creating for our firm. And they asked me if I could help them. That little side hustle bloomed into this crazy business that we have now, to the point where my partner and I ended up shutting down our RIA. And that way she could focus on being a mom and I could focus on this business, helping other advisors and having, in my opinion, an exponentially greater impact than what I could do solo. So that's a Cliff Notes version of my journey to get to this place today.
Very nice. And if I'm not mistaken, because we've had someone on the show before whom I believe you know fairly well, Dalil Allison, and him and his consulting company specializes in firms that utilize Microsoft's suite of products. So what I was interested about is bringing you on for a similar-ish episode, but you're Google-based, correct?
Yes, a lot of our clients are in the Google universe. We know Dalil and Levbert, his partner. We absolutely love Rooks and the work that they're doing. And we're so happy to be able to have them as referral partners for those folks that love Microsoft and want to stay within its universe. That's not us. And what it just really illustrates for me is that there's a specialist for every need. We're not the Microsoft folks, but we are more than happy to help folks in the Google universe and also utilizing tools like Zapier to assist in those automation setups.
Awesome. So let's walk through. I mean, I'm a big believer in automating the non-human components of every aspect of the business, right? That doesn't necessarily have to have a human involved. That said, what that does is it frees up time for you to over rotate towards the human components. So I guess my question would be, can you start just like kind of rattling off some examples of things that can be automated inside of the business that advisors, may or may not be thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more with your assessment. There are some things that a human just does better than a computer, but there are a lot of things, rote data entry, for example, that a computer will do better and faster than a human. And I love the idea of freeing up time for folks to focus on that human interaction, that value add that they bring to clients versus just the boring everyday stuff that they have to do but don't really love. Some examples of that would be things like creating an automated onboarding, or rather, let's start at the beginning. Let's go chronologically at the lead part of the process. So things like we were just talking about this before we started the show, somebody fills out a contact form on your website, rather than having a member of the team have to go and transfer that information into your CRM system, like Wealthbox or Redtail. Automation can take that data and find or create a contact record or household record or both in your CRM system. Could also do things like kick off a workflow to remind you or the team to follow up with that person after the contact is received. Because as we all know, especially when it's a paid lead source, like a smart asset lead, for example, speed is sometimes going to make the difference between you closing the deal or getting pushed to the side. Getting a little bit later in the process, we take that contact, for example, and when that person maybe does sign up to have a call with you, whatever information they fill out on their booking form on your scheduling software, or maybe you send them a questionnaire after they schedule that initial call, we can add that information to that existing contact record, and we can start to put some notes together so that each time you meet with that person, you've got a running list of all the things that you've talked about, can segregate the things that need to be top of mind, but also keep the things that for either compliance reasons or organizational opportunities need to be collected. And then we'll do a lot of things around forms. So things like, and this is probably one of the very first things that I set up, and still to this day, one of the most popular things that we help folks set up. We call it our documentation needs list generator. And this really stems back to my time as a loan officer, is we have our folks, either they themselves, the advisor, or their clients, or together, they'll fill this questionnaire out. It's about 15 questions. We often customize it depending on the type of work that our clients do. But based on the answers to those questions, it generates a customized list of what the client needs to provide documentation-wise, so that you can have an informed conversation with that prospective client or your now actual client in order to generate their financial plan and fully understand their situation, rather than giving them a one-size-fits-all list and then they have to figure out, what do I need? And then we even take it a step further. We do things like allow folks to upload directly to the form. It's a one-way upload, so it's more secure. They can't go back and accidentally delete something. You have access to it immediately. And then we can even incorporate one final component as far as sending reminders to folks who haven't finished giving you everything that you need. Because as we all know, clients oftentimes will have 5 documents out of the 10 you need, and then they'll say, I'll come back later, I'll give you the rest another time. But do they? Sometimes yes, but some people require just a little bit more hand-holding. We try to facilitate that part of the process so you don't have to worry about somebody follow up? Did we need to chase this person down? Let the system take care of those reminders, let them get everything organized as much as possible. And then if at any point a person needs to step in and facilitate that conversation, they absolutely can. But as much as can be handled by automation, we set it up to do that. So those are just some common examples of the things that we'll help people with.
Awesome. Yeah. And I want to emphasize too that what I'm gathering from as every automation that you mentioned, it's like, okay, well, that person no longer needs to do this. That person no longer needs to do that. And you can take one of two approaches, I would imagine. I'm curious to know like what you commonly see. So one is either you can trim down the cost of your business by not needing as many people inside of it. And some people are all for that and they're like running lean and mean and that's wonderful. Other folks, which is also wonderful, has concerns around, well, now I don't need this person anymore, but they've been loyal to me for the last, 2 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever the time frame is. And there may be some fear that automation replaces them. But I would also say that if the person is wired in such a way to be excited to grow and evolve, they can work on higher level activities and tasks within the business. So I guess my question would be, as you're helping people automate various components of their business, what do you see as the most common result of that now that work is no longer needing to be done by an actual human?
Yeah, it's a really good question. That's something that we thought we would get a lot more, I guess, pushback around, especially at the beginning stages of our business. But what we really found is that we're not replacing humans at all. It's like we talked about at the beginning, we're freeing up the humans to do the things that truly add value, that build meaningful relationships with clients that computers really can't do. And by taking away the work that the computer can do, we just free up that time and the energy to be able to give better customer service, allowing people to have the capacity now, rather than focusing on just getting through the day, to be able to strategically plan what they're going to do as far as sales and marketing activities, doing customer outreach, and giving that surprise and delight component. So I would say, as far as what we see for outcomes, it really is two different things. We have a lot of folks that are solos. They haven't yet hired staff, and they're trying to head off that need to hire, at least for a little bit longer. That way, when they do hire, they can hire somebody who's going to be a higher level position, a more strategic position within the company, rather than just an admin person. The other scenario we see is that we do have folks with advisors or team members that are doing double roles. They're doing the advising, but they're also doing the admin, not because they find it exciting or they want to do that work, but because they absolutely have no choice. So by taking that burden away from them, it's not a bad thing. It's not eliminating their job entirely. It really is just allowing them to refocus their time and refocus their energy on activities that will grow the business and or increase customer satisfaction.
Understood. We have this, you made me think about this. So we have this exercise that, I don't know if you do this with your folks, or maybe something to integrate into your process. So we have what's called an energy audit. And it's a play off of, I believe it's Stephen Covey's time management quadrant, but it's where you get the most energy and where you get drained. Your energy gets drained in your business. So it's things that you love to do and you're great at, things that you like to do and you're good at. In the bottom, it's things that you don't like to do, but you're still good at, and things that you don't like to do and you're bad at. So as you're talking, I'm thinking of the energy audit exercise and thinking, okay, anything that's in the bottom two quadrants, if that can be, because you're typically spending 40 to 60% of your time there, because oftentimes you have to, if that can just be automated and taken off your plate, even things like, silly example, we were laughing about it before, but it takes out the human error. So in the calendar invite for this podcast, spelt your last name in a ridiculous way that didn't even sound like it, and it was a little embarrassing on my end. And you were very graceful in laughing at it and not being upset. But like even little things like that, it takes out the risk of human error in your process, which when you're working with a prospect trying to get them, to become a client, if there's a misspelling on their name or an issue with, their date of birth is wrong or something small like that, that could be the thing that prevents them. Because if you're messing up then already, that could be the thing that gets them to not do business with you. So I feel like it also takes out the risk of human error. But that energy audit, going back to that point, I think if things fall into the bottom two quadrants that can be automated, that frees up a ton of time. And that leads me to my next question. I don't know if you measure this because it would be, somewhat difficult because it would be self-reported by the folks that you work with, but just like kind of a gut check, if an advisor automates every aspect of their business that can possibly be automated, what do you find is a result of that as it relates to freed up time to be able to allocate towards growth or client experience and things like that?
Yeah, you're right. It's a very difficult thing to measure. We've tried in the past to have folks fill out surveys. Part of it, and I'm going to call everybody out, including myself on this measure, is that folks aren't often accustomed to tracking their time to even give us that initial baseline of how much time they're actually spending to begin with. The other thing that's difficult to measure with that question is going back to this idea of two separate pathways. We have folks that are coming to us to help with automation to take things off of their plate, but we also have other folks that are already running pretty lean and efficient practices as far as time and energy and effort is concerned. And they're coming to us to add some of that additional touch point component, to add that surprise and delight factor where maybe they feel like, okay, I've gotten everything streamlined. I'm running an efficient practice. I'm doing the things that need to be done on a daily basis. But I do want to encourage my clients to be able to reach out more frequently, or I at least want to give them some sort of connection point that keeps me top of mind. Things like sending automated birthday reminders, or even, this is probably going to sound like a weird juxtaposition of automation and not automation, but things like sending out a request to mail out a handwritten card. There's a company called Handwritten that we often use, and they generate handwritten cards, physical mailed cards, but you as the advisor or the team don't have to actually spend the time to write the card. You can craft a message, but it goes out, and things like that. Just a little bit extra level of service, but without having to add extra time and effort to your day. But for the folks that do come to us again, the third thing that makes it a really difficult question to answer is that we have a wide range of projects. If we're thinking about the smaller end of the spectrum, maybe automating 1, 2, or 3 step Zap is going to save you 5 minutes every time whatever that action that we're automating occurs. Something like taking a contact's information from your contact us form on your website and putting it into your CRM system. Maybe that takes maximum 1 to 2 minutes each time it happens, but scale that by the number of times it happens in a week, a month, a year, and you start to see the impact of setting up those automations. So I know that's not a direct answer to your question. I'm not purposefully being vague, I promise, but it is just a really hard question to answer. But that said, if folks have questions about it, we're happy to do an estimate up front. Hey, what are the things that you feel like you're spending too much time on? What are the areas that you feel like you're struggling with? And then we'll go on a case-by-case basis to try to get that assessment before we decide whether it's a valuable use of time, money, and energy to proceed with a project.
Yeah, and I wasn't expecting a clear-cut answer because, again, you're relying on someone else to know where they're at and then self-report moving forward. But you mentioned, a 5-minute task, you're saving 5 minutes times however often you perform that task. But I would also argue that it's more like saving maybe 10 minutes or at least like 7 minutes, because you think there's a transitional moment beforehand from whatever else you were doing to then doing that. And then there's the transitional time after the fact. So even if it's something if you like time yourself with a timer like this that I have, I just got in the mail to try and keep me focused on my tasks. But even if something saves you 5 minutes, there's that transitional time on either end that is saving as well. I want to talk more. So I feel like most advisors that I come across, their service model, it may not all be automated, but their service model is typically fairly buttoned up. And they're heavily focused on their practice management. But where I come in is trying to get them to do something similar as it relates to the experience that they're providing. And oftentimes there's staples that you can do, like a handwritten card, like a birthday message or a birthday call or something like that, that's relevant to everyone. But then there's things that are just personal to that client. Like if they like to, silly example, but if they like to cook, maybe you and your spouse, made a new recipe and it was delicious, and you take that recipe and you share it off to them, just as a nice touch point, right? So all that leads to my question, as far as what have you seen that you have helped advisors implement that helps the client experience become a little bit more scalable and provide less think time, so to speak? So you mentioned birthdays, you mentioned handwritten cards. What are some of those other softer touch points around experience that you've seen people implement into their business?
Yeah, I don't know that this is necessarily a softer touch point in the sense that it's like a warm and fuzzy thing. But I think anytime we can improve the operational experience, the client experience ultimately improves, and that leads to better client satisfaction. Whether it's something like sending a gift, that's an extra warm and fuzzy touch, maybe let's call it. But even something as simple as not losing documentation that somebody sends you, while it maybe isn't so warm and fuzzy, it definitely improves the overall client experience and leads to better outcomes with customer satisfaction. And even as far as the value that they're getting in the relationship with you, you're saving their time just as much as you're saving as your own, rather. So you're saving your own. And so anytime we can do that, it just leads to better client experience and better client satisfaction. Things again like sending reminders about missing documentation. Otherwise, what we find happens is we all fall prey to inertia. Things fall through the cracks. We kind of lose focus. We kind of lose the motivation. And the more you can encourage your clients and be their partner in helping them continue to work towards their goals, the better that outcome will be for both yourself as the advisor in your business, but also the better the outcome will be for your client too, because they're going to get more value out of the relationship with you, continuing to make progress versus stagnating. And that's why they've hired you in the first place, presumably.
So I was talking with a client this past Tuesday, and she had mentioned that. So we have this process called feedback marketing and doing interactive client surveys, which is, gathering feedback, from your clients, seeing if they're open to making introductions when they find it to be relevant, and kind of identifying if you should even bother prospecting with them or not. And she had entered into one of these interactive client survey sessions and was expecting like rave reviews. And there was rave reviews, just in full disclosure, but also there was a lot of, how should I say, there's a lot of constructive feedback, let's put it. A lot of constructive feedback around the onboarding process, where there was inaccuracies on stuff, there was delays in certain things, and then just the overall feedback was like, onboarding's a lot.
Yeah.
Right. And this advisor had no idea, because they have an onboarding team that everyone gets sent to when they say yes to become a client. So all that to say, it was a total blind spot on her end. And I hear a lot that the onboarding process can be very clunky, right? It's like all, warm and fuzzy through the sales process and building relationships. And then when it gets time to like actually do the deal, it's just a noticeable difference from what the prospect had experienced up to that point. So all that to ask, what do you see, if you could kind of try and walk me through step by step, a client says, or a prospect says yes to becoming a client. How should a really good onboarding process look to make sure that it's as smooth as possible, it's not clunky, and it's actually a good experience for that person?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And especially because onboarding is probably the area of the client lifecycle where automation, I think, can add the most value as far as the opportunities being abundant. I think it first and foremost starts with knowing your client base. We work with our clients that work with all types of different niches. Some of them work with retirees or pre-retirees. Some of them work with millennials. Some now are even working with Gen Z folks. I mean, there's really such a diverse array of different client profiles that our clients work with. And the first thing before you make any decisions about restructuring your process or setting up automation really revolves around knowing your client and what they want and what they need. And I love that idea of doing the survey. It would be great to be able to do that ahead of time, but sometimes retrospect, while that constructive criticism can be a little bit painful to get, it's so valuable for that very reason. So once you have an idea of what your client wants and needs, that's going to be your foundation for structuring the process itself. But best practices, in my opinion, always revolve around breaking up large chunks of information into manageable and bite-sized pieces. It kind of goes back to that idea of setting a big goal and then breaking that bigger goal up into smaller, manageable milestones. That way, as you achieve each milestone, you can see your progress and also get that satisfaction of having completed something. Versus, oh, there's a list of 25 things I need to do and I'm getting it all together in one shot. I'm totally overwhelmed and I don't know where to start, to the point where I'm just not going to do anything. So just to give you a high level outline of a really clean onboarding process, I think it starts even a little bit before the client actually signs on the dotted line. A lot of our clients initially are hesitant to get more information upfront from people who are not yet clients. But I think that if you can move a little bit of what you would normally get in the onboarding process to the front end when they are still a lead and not yet signing on the dotted line, it helps balance out the step-by-step of that onboarding process. So something like your initial intake questionnaire, getting just a little bit more of that quantitative information, things like what is your income level, maybe collecting a handful of documents at the front end of the process. Not so much, again, it really boils down to knowing your client, not so much that you're going to scare folks away or turn them away, but enough so that you have a clear picture of who they are and what they need before they even become a client. I think that rather than turning folks away, that actually can breed trust and satisfaction and improve outcomes as far as conversion. From there, taking the information you already have and not asking for it a second time. Again, going back to the idea of automatically moving that data into its ultimate location where it needs to live. We don't have to worry about asking the same things a second time. We can cut all of those things out of that onboarding questionnaire and make that a little bit smoother. From there, we typically, from the onboarding questionnaire, will generate that documentation needs list that I referenced earlier, using either a separate small questionnaire or utilizing that same set of questions that we've already asked them to get a list to them of what they need to provide. Then we have folks upload their documents, or sometimes, again, depending on your client, you've got to know your client, we have an opportunity for folks to bring things in person. In this day and age, most of our clients are fine and comfortable with having digital document transfer, but there are still some people that really just want to come in person and see you face to face. Whatever is going to work is going to be the best fit for them. And then finally, the last step in a typical onboarding process for our clients revolves around getting the contract signed, getting the payment rendered, and then getting them into the financial planning software. And so usually that's the flow. We go from onboarding questionnaire, document upload, getting the contract signed, pre-populated, of course, hopefully with the data about their engagement and their personal information like their name and email. Once they've signed the contract, we send them a payment invoice or get them onboarded into your custodian and your billing software so that you can start that AUM billing process. And then last but not least, we do the walkthrough, getting them into the onboarding portal. No matter how you slice it, it is just a lot of steps. There's an overwhelming number of things that need to be done at that point of the flow. But I think, again, if you break it up into bite-sized pieces, you kind of preview a little bit at each stage what's coming next and what they can expect, and then give them all the resources they need as far as who can we call on the team if we need help and get stuck, can we come in person if we prefer to do it that way, or maybe we include some sort of an onboarding walkthrough video that walks them through visually step by step. All of those things together help make that a much more manageable, and I wouldn't say enjoyable, but as enjoyable as it can be, process.
So there's three things that stood out that I really like. One is I'm a big believer in taking that email that has 25 requests and breaking that down into bite-sized chunks. Even, in your second email to them requesting whatever you're requesting, just like, hey, we made it past step one. Nice work. The next step, it like that sense of accomplishment, and it kind of builds momentum. And you're also, rather than sending, I'm making this up, but one email with 25 things, but instead sending 5 emails with 5 things, you're also, I'm a big believer in, some people say, hey, trust, it just takes time. I think trust is the accumulation of positive experiences and touch points. So if you can take one touch point and turn it into 5, you're just condensing that trust curve, with these folks. So that's one thing that stood out. The other thing that stood out is I'm a big proponent of integrating video into the process. So I love the idea of, doing like a video walkthrough of what to expect. So they have a visual representation of the steps that they're going to need to take. And then the last thing, which I would imagine most advisors do, but they probably do it manually now, which again, just takes time. But when you're sending certain documents to them, if you already know their freaking email or their phone number or their date of birth, like, do not make them enter that themselves. And frankly, don't have your team enter that themselves, because there's a way that you can pre-populate it automatically, and it just saves so much time. And when a client or prospect opens up documents, see that it's already 65% of the way filled, like, that just makes it so much easier. So those are 3 things that stood out. And one of the last things I want to go through today is, have you dove deep yet into AI and how that can be integrated into advisors' practices? And if so, what could they integrate now that's super helpful? And where do you think it's going that it may evolve into?
Yeah, I would say we've dipped our toe in the water, metaphorically speaking, of AI. We're nowhere near utilizing it to the capacity that it can be utilized even today. But absolutely, we're just, I think, at the tip of the iceberg as far as the functionality that AI can bring to advisors. In the next even 1 year, I think we're going to see dramatic changes in that landscape. And the next decade, it's going to just look completely like night and day. I think it's going to be akin to the creation of the internet, how different our work is going to look. As far as things that advisors can start to do today, things like AI transcription of meetings is a great place to start. It's super easy to implement. There's a number of different softwares out there. There's Otter, there's Fireflies, and just recently, Zoom even released their own built-in AI transcription component, and we've started to use it, and it's pretty great right now. So if you're already using Zoom and you don't want to pay for another platform, it's built in. If you've got a subscription already, that would be a really great place to start. Another example of a place that's easy to use and not really a huge learning curve with AI is something like using Zapier. Zapier before was already a low or no code automation system that you could utilize. Now they've also started to incorporate some AI tools into their own system, things like generating an outline of a Zap before you start to detail out connecting fields and connecting data points. We've dabbled around with that. It's not 100% accurate, But even just shaving off a couple of minutes each time you're setting something up can really add up over time. There's a chatbot feature, things like if somebody reaches out to you on your website and they have a question or concern, it can dynamically reply, at least initially, to that concern and route them to the right place, or route them to the right team member. Even if you do ultimately want to connect them with the person, it can cut down on that efficiency curve as far as getting them from point A to point B. So things like that are just really tangible and easy to start examples that anybody could really dabble in for maybe an hour or two and pretty quickly grasp how to use those things. But I mean, again, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I'm simultaneously nervous and excited about how AI is going to impact the landscape, but we don't even know at this point. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, and just to echo the note-taking services out there, one that you didn't mention that I've experienced through a meeting that I had recently, I think it's Fathom HQ, if not mistaken. Yeah. And first of all, it was sent immediately after the meeting. And it was like, here's the high level points of what I said. Here's the high level points of what they said. And here are the action items that came as a result of that meeting. And I was like, damn, that is spot on. Like, it did not miss anything. And I have yet to, because that meeting was just a couple weeks ago, but I've yet to integrate that into my business. But I can see how that saves a ton of time. Like, think about sending a follow-up email afterwards that has, hey, here's what we talked about, and here's what you need to do. Here's what I need to do. That's done. Like, that saves 15 or 20 minutes, never mind the 15 or 20 minutes you're delaying doing it and convincing yourself to, write that email. So I can 100% see how that can be helpful. Now, I don't know if you would know this. Maybe you do. I certainly don't. But are there any compliance concerns around AI note taking, and help me understand that if you have a good grasp of it?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up. I was saying, I should have mentioned that. So thank you for reminding me to talk a little bit about that. I do think that that really is a lot of the hesitation that I feel personally, especially when it comes to advisors. When you're a consultant in another type of industry, you're probably not discussing so much personal information or any personal information with your client, things like social security numbers or bank account numbers. We don't know. We don't know the full long-term ramifications of some of the data storage policies of these different systems. So my best practice would be, start by talking to your compliance person, ask them what they know, what they don't know, what they think you should be doing as a best practice. But B, because regulators themselves are not always experts at technology, and your compliance person may or may not be an expert at technology either, it's always a best practice to just keep that information transfer as limited as possible. Do your due diligence, do as much as you can, but if you can limit the passing of that personal and private information just as a preventative measure, that'll cut down on the amount of risk, I suppose, for lack of a better word, that you're opening yourself and your clients up to as far as things like hacking or data storage policies that maybe aren't so compliant or what we would prefer to see. But I think as the landscape evolves, there will be more pivoting around, okay, we need to make sure that there are secure AI options for protected industries, healthcare, finance, things like that, where people do need to make sure that that data is secure. But right now, we're sort of in that initial Wild West stage of AI where I don't really feel like there's a lot of clarity around some of these systems and what their data storage practices are.
Yeah, and I can certainly see, things like socials and data bursts or whatever being a cause for pause, so to speak. But I also would imagine, similar to recording a call, you can pause the AI service if you're collecting that personal information, because not only does it help for purposes of following up via email, but think about, and some advisors still do this, but think about back, before all this stuff, advisors would type up their case notes for compliance purposes and for their own memory for when they go and meet with them again. And then a lot of advisors adopted like the dictation software, like a Copy Talk or something like that. But again, that still takes time, and it's just so tedious and annoying to do, where you can be like, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow. And then before you know it, you have 10 or 15 meetings that you need to do case notes for. And now that's a half a day's worth of work. But if that's just done and then populated into your CRM because of AI, like, again, that saves so much time. So hopefully folks can work through the compliance challenges along the way, because that's a big time saver and a weight off people's shoulders, because no one gets excited about taking case notes and sending follow-up emails. So this has been great. And I think we're also like philosophically aligned, where it's, don't necessarily automate your business to get rid of your staff. Use that to free up their time to elevate them in their roles and do more high level style activities and things like that. But one of the things I want to pivot to, and we ask all of our guests this question, and for those of you who are listening, we ask our guests a book that's had an impact on them and why that is. So you submitted 2 books. And so I'm going to tee up both. So the nonfiction book that you teed up, and hopefully you can sell me on the fiction one, because I tend to stay in the nonfiction genre. So I'll be curious to see what that one's about. But the nonfiction book that you picked is The Lean Startup, which I can kind of deduce based on this conversation in that book why you like it. But what's the impact that it's had on you?
Yeah, I read that book a few years ago. My previous business partner and my RA and I had a pseudo book club during COVID, like a virtual book club. And that was one of the books that she recommended that we read. And I read it and I was blown away. I think the title kind of really gives it away. But really, the book is about using your time and your money effectively to start up and get to that idea of failing faster, so that if need be, you can pivot and continue to utilize that constructive criticism, either directly from folks or from your actual experience of failing in something, to continue to innovate and refine your process and your business and make more strides towards efficiency. So it's really just, I mean, I think in my opinion, I've always been of that mindset, for better or for worse. So I totally relate to when people are like, oh, I want to save time, I want to save money. That's always been my philosophy around business. But the book just really emphasizes the purpose behind it, and how not only it can be impactful in the short term, but also have long-term ramifications for the growth of your business. It's really quite a great book. I highly recommend it.
Well, my deductive assumption was spot on
Yes.
as to why you like it. And then, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing this, but Anna Nina. So I typically read books for business purposes, and I rarely say, what do I want to consume for leisure? So tell me about that book, and please pronounce it better than I did. But why'd you put that book on the list?
Yeah, Anna Karenina by Tolstoy. It's quite a long book. So if you're not a reader, it's probably not the best place to start with fiction. Or if you don't enjoy fiction, typically it's probably would not be my first recommendation. But I think it is such a powerful example of character building and changing people's lives. It's about Anna Karenina, and she falls in love with the wrong person, let's just say. And through that experience, she learns a lot of life lessons, as do the folks around her in the book. That's just the cliff notes of it. And there's also a movie, if that's more accessible. Movies are also
easy. Okay, I'll do that one.
But I would say, in my opinion, reading fiction is fun. I mean, it gives us that decompression time, which we really do need to focus on things other than our business. But I think fiction can also really be informative, even though it's not about real life people. The character traits that are imbued in all the characters in that book really are so realistic. and we can just learn a lot about ourselves as people, and also, take away lessons from other people's mistakes, for lack of a better word. So I hope that you do decide to check it out. Again, maybe not the best first foray into fiction if you're not a big fiction reader, but over time, as you grow a little bit more accustomed to that, it's a great book or movie if that's more your speed.
Well, I appreciate that perspective and take on it, because my preconceived notions around fictions are like, oh, I'm not gonna get anything out of this because it's fake, right? But that perspective of, hey, it may not be a true story, but there are real lessons along the way. Just looking at it through that point of view inspires me a little bit more than I was before to break into the fiction space. So I appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Awesome. So if I'm listening to this podcast, I'm an advisor, and there's some things that you mentioned that maybe I've dabbled in, and there's probably a lot where it's like, wow, that would be amazing if my business looked like that. Where should people go to find you, to connect with you, and explore what it could look like to work with you?
Yeah, the best place to find us is our website. It's sphinxautomation.com, SPHYNX automation.com. And right on our homepage, there's a getting started button. You can book an introductory call with our team. They'll kind of walk you through, what are you hoping to accomplish? What does your current setup look like? And what have you tried that has or hasn't worked for you so far? And just make sure that it's a good fit on both sides, because we're really proud of the work we do. But at the same time, we also want to make sure that we're adding value. We're going to make sure that we see that there is value there to be had before we continue down that process. So that would be the best place to find us. We've also got a ton of free resources on our website. If you're not quite sure if you're ready to talk to us yet, you can sign up for our automation mini course. It's 21 days of tips and tricks for improving your process and automation efficiency. We've also got some data comparison sheets. So if you're looking at, for example, bringing on a data gathering system, a form system, we've got a side-by-side comparison of 3 different options and things like that. We really try to add value. We know that we're not going to be a great fit to work with everybody. We know that everybody may not need our help, but at the same time, if we can even just make small strides to improving the space for advisors, we feel like we're doing good work.
Awesome. And I will echo, there is a lot of really great free resources on the website. You had directed me to that after or during our intro call, and I poked around afterwards. I was like, wow, this is not only helpful, but it's also very detailed as well, particularly the various workflows that you have, stood out to me. And I'm kind of doing this off of a whim, so I hope this is okay with you, but I haven't done this before. But as we're chatting and whatnot, I'd like to also put an offer out there for everyone listening. So if you want help with automating aspects of your business, certainly reach out, go to the website, set up a call. However, if you've also been considering coaching as well, and really leveling up your business from a growth standpoint, a client experience standpoint, generating more referrals in your business, taking a look at your practice management process, feel free to shoot me an email at david@modelfa.com. And if you reference this episode, Model FA will pay for your first 4 automations through Sphynx. So I'm just going off on a whim, see if that generates any emails, but I want to be able to invest in your success, advisors who are listening, and yours as well, and see if we can get integrated together. So we'll cover the first 4 automations for you if you work with us for coaching as well. So all that said, really appreciate your time. Looking forward to doing some work together. And for all those who are listening, definitely an episode worth sharing. If you'd be so kind as to leave us a review as well, that would be appreciated. But again, thanks for joining the show.
Yes, thanks so much, David, for having me. And thanks everybody for listening.